Thank you for coming. Everybody watching live and online for the first time, thank you for turning out and watching our feed as well. Unfortunately, I've come down with the flu a couple of days ago, so I'm a little bit less going on upstairs than I would like to have today, but I'll try and do my best for you. Also means that a little bit more free flow in my normal one, where I've got slides for you and the rest. There will be no death by PowerPoint today. So I thought I might start the very simple point of a security camera system is a very complicated thing, but you've got to think right the way back to the individual that's purchasing this. So this is your customer, this is yourselves, this is your house, your business. You know, the thought of why do I need a security system, or what's caused me to think about needing a security system in the first place. So there are a range of different applications, a range of different businesses, and different ways of setting up cameras and different types of cameras and the rest that will cover some detail on all of those a little bit later on. But we'll start a little bit with the psychology of it and then the thought of why I might need one in the first place. So in a traditional sense, a security camera system is cameras for a very obvious reason. You put cameras up around a business to protect yourself, to look after OH&S issues, to look after your pets when you're away. If it's at home, there's a whole heap of different applications that are there for it. But your customer is going to come to you with an idea of, I need a security camera system because of X. And it's one of my least favorite things to think about, that a lot of the times when they come in saying, I need it, there's a reason for that that isn't a particularly pleasant one. That may be something as small as somebody broke the glass in my front of my business last week and I want to just catch them in future, to I've had a home invasion, or somebody's thrown tainted meat over in the backyard and the dogs have eaten it and gotten sick. And so when you're thinking about that person that's there, you've also got to be a little bit compassionate about who they are and not just try and sell them an X kit or a specialist system or the biggest, most expensive thing because of the situation they're in and what they're feeling. We had a customer a couple of years ago who just kept adding cameras. They started out with, I think, 12 around their house. By the time they were finished, they were over 30 cameras around a domestic house. They had a multi-stage alarm system with all sorts of other things, but they didn't feel safe in their own house anymore. And so you've got a customer that's in that position that you need to be able to look after, but understanding what's driven them to that point might help you solve their problem better than just adding more stuff onto the system for them. Now, I sort of want to think about some of the more positive things for it. We have a fantastic pair of dogs at my house, and although I've got cameras out the front for general security and watching the laneway and things like that, at the back I've got a couple of them, and they're ostensibly to watch the rear door and the rear access, but anybody who's been seeing my Facebook page will notice the ongoing war that my wife and I and our vegetable patch has with our dogs. So cameras can be something a little bit fun as well, and maybe that's something you can add expectations about their system, so they're less likely just to want to go everything for security and more, I'm going to watch camera number 6 all day every day to see what my dogs are up to or my cat is up to while I'm not home. We also we see foxes in our inner city area. We've got ringtail possums that run along the fence line, and all sorts of other birds like white egrets and the rest that are on our cars at night. So you sort of think about the other aspects of it and can be a little bit more of a human side from that as well. So keep that in mind when you're looking at it and talking about it with your customers. One of the main aspects that we can use it for here as a business is to also watch our shipping. So when we're sending packages out through the back, when we're bringing inwards goods or whatever else might be happening, it's an idea of making sure that stock goes where it's supposed to go, or that if something happens, we can go back to it and say, oh, that's right, it was in that box, it's under that other box that you've got over there, and off we go with it. So it can be a little bit of loss prevention in the back of house. Front of house, obviously, we can look at customers in their interactions in the store. So somebody goes up at something, we know about it. You know, if there's money missing from our till, well, it hasn't ever happened yet, but you know, those sort of things are stuff that can happen and can be viewable as well. So understanding where your customer needs that camera or will need that security will help you build the system on from that point. One other application which we've been involved with a little bit recently is help for vulnerable people. So people who are physically, mentally disabled, people who are caring for children that have problems, they might have a camera set up in the bedroom to make sure that somebody who might have a problem won't injure themselves at night, and so the parents can hear them or see them if they get up and start banging their head on the wall or doing something silly as well. So it can be a very positive thing in that sense and help a family out that's struggling just a little bit. Okay, so buses, trains, street corners, businesses, homes, everywhere you go, it's a massive, massive industry. So thinking about it from that point of view will hopefully help you sell more and understand your customers' needs for it. We are more or less used to the idea that we're going to be viewed everywhere we go. You know, if you walk down the main streets of Melbourne, you're probably captured on camera probably every second or two at the most, at the minimum rather. Walk around a corner and there'll be one up on the corner, one in the business alongside, and everything else everywhere you go. It's a very easy way of doing general surveillance over an entire area. So something that very, very positive in that sense can view out for people who are, you know, doing things they shouldn't be doing, or for funny videos, for the OH&S video at the end of the year of all the people doing stupid things like gaffer taping ladders together, for example, or you know, pulling one box off a shelf and all of the shelves and all of the lanes and everything falls over for it. I love those videos, and sometimes I get sent them by my customers, but I can't say anything about them or share them until the legal cases are over and done with as well. There's some quite that happens there. So yeah, all right, so that's the general sort of situation about these, but I want to talk now about thinking like the person who's going to be committing something on the camera, potentially. So I tend to find there are two types of people when it comes to breaking into a house or a property or taking money or stock or whatever else. Number one is the type of customers and the type of people who will do it no matter what. They're desperate, they need it, they absolutely have to commit this crime to do this thing. You can't really stop those people easily. You know, if somebody walks up to your house and is desperate for money for drugs or whatever else it might be, generally you won't be able to stop them breaking in. They'll get a crowbar out, they'll ram the car through the front door depending on how desperate they are for it all, and they will keep on going no matter what. So having the camera system there may give you the footage to take back to the police or take back to somebody later and say, hey, it was these people on this date at this time. So having a camera system may help with all of that. Having something as simple as a motion triggered sensor light out the front that illuminates half the street when it goes off and triggers is enough to put some people off for it. But the ones who are really determined will work out a way of getting through. And with a mask, with a hood pulled down low, with spray paint onto the camera, if they can get to it, there's a lot of ways they can make that camera system work the way that you're wanting it to. If somebody's determined enough, you know, they'll break into the gold underneath the Bellagio vault in Las Vegas just for a good movie and for the money that's involved with it. So just keep that in mind for your customers as well. It can never be 100% safe that way. Get a Rottweiler, get a shotgun, get a nice big light outside and cameras. You've probably got a pretty good chance of stopping most of it. But the other side of it are the ones that you're trying to stop in the first place, which are the ones that put off by a camera. They'll walk down the street, look at the house and go, it's got cameras on it, move on to the next house. Or they'll walk down the street or drive down the street and realise every single house has a security camera system, and they go, this is too much drama for me. I'm going to move into the next street, the next suburb, and I'm going to find an easier target to go for. Those are fantastic for us because you'll see them at the top of the driveway and they'll just keep on moving. And that's, yeah, the best kind of offender is one that doesn't offend in the first place. If you look at the statistics and the interviews from police and burglars and other people like that, they all basically say that people are more often put off by these systems than are caught by them. So just keep that in mind for your customer's sake as well. Even something simple but covering the area is better than having $10,000 worth of stock that, $10,000 worth of cameras and system that doesn't help you in the case of somebody who's really determined to break in. All right, so about those different types of people for it gives you a bit of an idea of where to go from there. All right, so we've decided we need one because for our business security, for our home security. So which one do we need? Which type of cameras, what type of cabling, and what type of recording do we actually need to make this work? So traditional camera systems were analog. So an analog camera system uses coaxial cable, and most of you have dealt with this before. RG59, RG6, 75 ohm coax cable run throughout a building, plus a bit of power either locally or through common cable alongside this one. Fire up a little camera or a big camera and off it goes. And up until the last few years, coax cabling and analog cameras were the predominant camera and system on the market, and they're still quite good. People have been doing things like license plate recognition, facial recognition with analog cameras for 20 years plus. It's really still a very reliable, very simple system for it. Coax cabling is quite cheap. Compared to data cabling, maybe not quite the same sort of level of cheapness, but there's less complexity involved. In the networking side, this is a self-contained system. I plug all these cameras into my DVR, run my hard drives, or in the olden days, a VCR, VHS tape, press record, and the thing just goes. So very, very simple, very classic system to work with. Still a lot of these systems on the market, and a lot of very expensive analog systems were installed for a very long time. So somebody who's already got an analog system may not want to spend a lot more money on cameras that they've already got. Instead, use the cameras that are there, use a hybrid DVR, and put in a couple of new IP cameras or upgrade some of the existing ones to better ones if that's what they're trying to do. Use the existing coax cabling to run an IP camera system if they're really sold on going that way or they need a specific feature. But don't discard the coax that's there just because it's an older system. It may be very, very, very good stuff. Some of the casinos and some of the banks and the rest of them are still running coax-based analog systems, depending on where you are. If you choose the right camera, it doesn't matter which cabling you've got run in the background for it. So, old school analog still out there and in a big way. This one is sort of in between. So this is a coax-based system again. Power, same way the other ones were, but this is actually a digital camera. Now, they call this one analog high definition, or AHD, and there are a few other sort of competing formats in that range. HD SDI, which would be very familiar to a lot of high-end CCTV installers, but also the broadcast industry uses HD SDI to transfer video signals quite a long way over flexible coax. There's HD TVI, HD CVI as well. These two, HD TVI is a bit of an open format. It's used by some manufacturers. And HD CVI is a slightly more closed format. It's owned by, I think, the Dahua Corporation. So any Dahua system that uses that type of thing or one of their sub-brands or OEM ones might come up against it. The reason I bring these up isn't just to sort of spout acronyms at you, or acronyms at you. The idea is if you come across a coax system, it may be any of these ones. So just by putting in a new hybrid DVR won't necessarily fix the issue that you have. If the cameras are Dahua HD CVI cameras, for example, and you try to mix in an AHD camera or a TVI camera or something else, it probably won't work because the formats are incompatible with each other. It's a little bit of a fractured system for it. So something like our hybrid systems can work with most of those formats, but you can't mix and match. Can't have some from here, some from here, some from here, because that won't necessarily work properly. So just keep that in mind when you're looking at reinstalling or redoing a coax-based system as well. It may be simpler in the long run to replace all the cameras or to replace the DVR with one from the same brand as the cameras to try and make sure it's as reliable as possible. What else was I going to talk about with Coax? Coax has one huge benefit in some environments in that it's fast. A coax-based system, camera to here, there's not much processing that's going on at all. So if you're looking at something where timing or response time is critical, a coax-based system may still be your best bet. So think about, say, a nightclub where something goes wrong on the floor and somebody's thrown a punch, somebody's thrown a drink, whatever it might be, and the security guards are watching in the office upstairs and they see it and they have to respond to it more or less straight away. So in something like motor racing or, motor racing, you're going to use different sort of higher end type systems, but if you're trying to monitor the track movements or people in the crowd or whatever and speed is critical, then a coax-based system may be better for you than an IP-based one instead. So again, horses for courses. Pick the right one that suits the environment for your customer as well. One other quick thing on it. Yeah, sorry. Just on that, if you've got an IP-based system, what sort of delay would be typical or range? So the delay on an IP-based system, it depends a lot on all the individual stuff that you've chosen. So if you choose a lower frame rate, lower bandwidth, lower resolution, run the cameras straight into the NVR, have a nice fast processing NVR and the rest of it, the difference might be a frame or two. Could be fractions of a second or a second or so. If you're running distributed IP system where you've got a camera there on a PoE switch that's running into a local network switch that's then running all the way back through to an NVR located somewhere else on site, if your network switches are unmanaged and the priority isn't there for it, that delay could be anywhere from a couple of seconds to 30 seconds or more if the network's particularly slow. So if you're doing something with IP, I was going to bring it up a little bit later on as well, but when you're doing something with IP, you are a little bit at the mercy of the IT network, the rest of the IP network if you're working within it. So I strongly advise you, if you're doing anything IP-based, or even with the DVR, if you're hooking that into their data network, that you make sure you're talking with their IT guys as well, their IT team, to make sure that they've got the bandwidth available for you, that their system is ready for the extra overhead of cameras and video that you're going to be putting through their system as well. So just keep that a little bit in mind. One last quick thing on coax cameras. HD SDI and HD TVI are generally regarded to have some of the best colour reproduction on the market as well, just based on the chipsets and things that they use for it. CVI and AHD maybe not quite at the same level for it. So if you have somebody who is particularly sensitive to colour or is particularly sensitive to seeing what's going on for a critical purpose, in that sort of situation I'm thinking more like a church or a funeral parlour where they're monitoring the service or they're monitoring something, they're recording it for posterity as well as for everything else. If they don't go for a proper PTZ, nice controlled Sony or whatever, camera for that system, going for a coax system rather than IP might give them a little bit better performance and better colour so that they're happier with the result as well. That is something that we do get asked about on a fairly basis, so just keep that in mind as well. The biggest drawbacks with the coax cameras though, there aren't very many specialised cameras within that, and control can be quite difficult. So a traditional camera like this one, like an old school one, this has got no adjustment whatsoever. It's got no smarts, it's got no video processing beyond taking this signal and punching it out the back end again. So you're very much reliant on the hardware that's involved here, the quality of the lens, the quality of the CCD and the rest. Whatever comes in is what comes out the other end of it. If you want wide dynamic range, if you things specific to do with video processing, it's got to be built right into that camera to make it happen, because when it's coming out the other end, it may as well be a standard yellow RC connection that you plug into your old TV. But that's one other thing to keep in mind. The resolutions are the other things. So on an old analog system, generally speaking, the maximum resolution you get to is about 700 TV lines, 960H, that sort of thing. With AHD, they were typically 720p or 1080p. And then TVI, CVI and SDI and so on, they've actually made some fair strides recently in getting up into 5 and 6 megapixels through a Coax based digital system. So you can get high resolutions now, but traditionally that was not something you could do. IP though, they're running 12, 15 megapixel cameras all day of the week. Sony's got a beast of a camera that's over 30 megapixels that they're using for very specific purposes. And on a very big PTZ with a nice bit of zoom, imagine looking at an entire, big entire plaza and then zooming all the way in on a cup of coffee a kilometre away. That's the sort of thing you can do with a really, really, really big camera and a big sensor. So there are some limitations to the Coax ones, but they are still quite applicable out there. So if you come across them, don't disregard them straight out, but just keep in mind that they might be a useful thing for you. Okay, moving on to Coax ones. IP. So most of the stuff that I've got here today is IP. My house CCTV cameras are IP. The ones on our business here are IP based, and a lot of the ones out in the industry are moving more and more to IP. There are complexities involved with it, but people are still choosing it. So I want to try and give you a few reasons why it might be a good idea, and why it might be in a lot of cases as well. So IP based system takes a camera like, well, in the most basic sense, this little beastie. This is an IP camera, 720p, but it's designed as a domestic Wi-Fi camera, so that's about what you're likely to be. It's got a very dodgy little ball joint on this one, and this is one that I've had for years and years and years. Simple app to control it. Only recording is on board, although these days they allow cloud recording and other things like that if you buy a subscription with them. Very limited types of cameras available. Infrared performance at nighttime is limited on a camera like this one, but for the cost that it is, to put a few of these around an apartment or a small house just to do a bit of basic monitoring, fantastic. Edimax does a great range that we've also got that do overhanging door cameras and garage cameras and other things like that. So there are perfect applications for a simple camera system too. If you want Wi-Fi built in, those sort of cameras are going to be your friend. But when you start getting to higher resolutions, you need bandwidth, or domestic Wi-Fi starts failing badly when you do it that way. If you want to run camera on a shed a kilometre away from your farm, you're probably going to need some sort of Wi-Fi link between the two, or a beam link between the two. That way you can get the signal there in the best quality you possibly can. And it needs to be reliable too. And home Wi-Fi will spike up and down depending on how many kids are watching YouTube or Netflix at this point, or how many are streaming Fortnite or CSGO or whatever else they're up to. So keeping that in mind and keeping that separate from everything else makes an IP system more or less useful too. However, cameras natively, almost without exception, 1080p or above. So you've already got a higher resolution to play with. And that means even if you have a fixed lens camera like one of these little UniView ones that's here, or actually this one isn't fixed lens, but if you had a simple camera like that one, put it in the right position, there might be enough resolution to see what you need to see for a fairly cheap price to make that happen. Kit cameras in particular are one of those ones I wanted to talk about today. A kit camera, typically 4 cameras that are identical, comes with an NVR, with a hard drive, everything all ready to go. UniView has some good ones with screens and the rest all in the same box in the same package. They are fixed lens, so what you come out of the box with is what you get. Plug it up in the corner and see a 90-odd degree field of view at a set resolution, no adjustments. Plug it all in, it picks it up and receives it automatically, bang, job done. That's a really simple way to get something sorted for your customer if they just want basic surveillance. And they are cheap, they're readily available and quick to install. So all of that is a great thing. If you want to try and get 30 metres worth of infrared at night time, the kit camera is probably not for you. If you want to dial in a specific view and a specific distance, a kit camera again is probably not going to be the one that suits you best. So, again, there's a sort of industry-wide scorn for some of the cheaper kits and the cheaper systems that people often buy. They're advertised, as the weekly special from retailer X or from, big box retailer Y. People buy them, put them in, they work, And that's it. That's their job. And that's what they're supposed to do. They're supposed to get people introduced to the idea of CCTV, to do a simple job, to make it work and get it running. And some of you will have installed those, some of you will have sold them as well. But anything beyond the basic, that's when your customer needs to start talking to a professional and understanding, I need this, I need this. I've been happy with this, but now I can't see license plates at night time. I need to upgrade and change. So in some sense, a kit camera or a kit system might be your gateway drug. You know, it's the thing that introduces you to it, and then you're not satisfied unless you've got $900 PTZ around your house, surveilling and moving and shifting all. You've probably got an issue. Just putting it out there, even I don't have that, and I'm fairly nerdy. Kit cameras take you to the next. But there is one little caveat in the middle, or one point I want to make. I had a customer call me up the other day because they bought an NVR off us to replace an old dead one, and they put it on with their existing camera. They bought it online. They just bought it, shipped it, got it there, plugged it in. It didn't work because their existing camera system was a kit camera system, and it used non-standard power. So most IP camera systems just take a data cable, NVR's PoE ports or PoE ports on a switch, and that runs camera straight away, one cable, job done. However, a lot of kit cameras, NVRs, might run the standard PoE. They might run 12 volts over the Ethernet cable. They might run at 24 volts, and it's always active. Plug in an NVR that support that, and the NVR will go, I don't know what you're doing. Or in the worst case scenario, the camera will actually it can go wrong, or something can go wrong with the NVR as the voltage feeds the way that it's not supposed to. So if you are upgrading somebody with an IP system, check out what cameras they have and make sure that those cameras are supported by whatever NVR you want to replace it with as well. It's a big thing. For an example, our DOS IP8 INK kit, great little P kit, great 8 cameras, etc. It runs passive 12 volt system through its NVR. So if you had those cameras and wanted to put them onto another system, it's not going to be a very easy thing to make happen. So just be a little bit careful. In some cases, you can use something like the TP-Link PoE splitter, the TL-PoE 150S, I think it is. Takes a PoE input signal and then gives you 5 volt, 9 volt, or 12 volt output. Basically down converts the DC so you can run a separate DC if your camera supports it, feed it 12 volts that it wants, and then just use the data cable to actually supply the power instead. So something like our big PTZ here needs more power than PoE can provide on this one. So I've got DC power running into it, as well as a communications cable running at the same time. You can do the same sort of thing with cameras, but just keep that in mind if you are upgrading from one kit to another one. All right, okay. So, what was I going to talk about with IP other than that? Yes, part of the big thing with IP cameras is specialized very, very easily. Now that wouldn't have existed on an analog system. So something like the fisheye camera that this is, if I select it and change it, I can't see it when I'm around here. So a fisheye camera has got an extreme wide angle view. So it can be a full hemispherical view looking through almost a full sort of arc of what the camera can see. So if I do this and do that, probably gives us the best idea. So this is the native view that's coming out of this camera at the moment. And you can see that from me standing in front of the NVR that's here, the screen around the other side, our staff, all of you, and a lot of the ceiling is covered by the one camera. So imagine if I put that up about where that speaker is above you there, I'd be covering that entire area with one camera, which is great. One camera to do all those jobs. Mind you, I look gigantic in this one, as if I'm about to rampage through Tokyo and knock down buildings. So it's skewing the image because of the way the lens actually works. However, what these fisheye cameras do, and with a smart NVR, it can split each of those images up into a non-skewed version of it. So now I am as big as I normally am, more or less, and I'm just picking out that quad or that section of the image. It's flattened it and straightened it to make it work. And for any of the other areas, it's doing more or less the same thing. So you've now got sort of straight lines in the ceiling where before they were bowed and curved out. So one camera now becomes 4 cameras. The way this thing sets up in the DVR, or the NVR in this case, is you take that original camera feed, and when you go to install it, it actually adds the extra channels at the same time. And so you can isolate their own motion sensing, do whatever else you want to do with each of the different parts of that same image and same view. Not every NVR supports fisheye cameras, and you can see a little bit from this one. The resolution is a little bit low from here. There are different resolutions for these things, 12 megapixels, 10s, 15s, and so on. So you can more or less pick and choose to match what you're trying to do. UniView have a range of them. Our factory's got a range of them. There are a lot of other ones out in the market. Again, pick the ones that suit for what you're trying to do. Microphones built into them as well, which makes them quite useful for crowd monitoring, again in a nightclub situation or a bar. There are some that are more limited fisheye, so they might have a field of view that way and a bit of a field of view this way. Again, for a bar, cover the entire front of the bar and a little bit behind it as well. So there are some very unique ones that way. There are also cameras for things like trams and trains that are tiny, that can have a mobile NVR that just sits behind them. That's a hard thing to do with an analog system. With digital, it makes it very, very easy. And then I can also sync that up with my control room, so all of my trams are now monitored 24/7, and I've got full high-definition views of every single camera simultaneously around the network. Just wireless links or 3G, 4G links from each bus or train or whatever. Having talked about those and some of the specialised ones, let's get into a little bit of demoing here. So this one is, you'll notice something here. That's the actual general fisheye view for this one. This NVR supports the fisheye, but not entirely. So there's still a bit of scaling issue when you try to run it in a multi-screen view like that one. Selecting it as the primary target on this one, and then changing the view to one that focuses it, either as a single or a quad or something like that for it, will make it work. But if it's in a big multi-view like that one, it doesn't. So again, there are some different capabilities with different NVRs for it all. So let's have a look at this for now. This is our new 36-channel NVR. This will take up to 8 internal hard drives. We've got an eSATA port, or they can do IP SAN, so you can have extra storage on the network if you really want to bump this thing up. If you want a month's worth of recording for all 36 channels, you're probably going to have to do some external storage to match with it as well. 4K cameras capable and a 4K output capable as well. So it's about as current as you can make one of these things. It's got 16 channels worth of PoE on board, so you can run 16 channels internally for it. However, all the rest of the 36, now other 20 in this case, will be through PoE switches and on your network to increase the number of cameras that you need. And that's a pretty common feature across most IP NVRs. Your NVR may be capable of 16 channels, 8 channels, 4 channels, or let's say a NAS drive is capable of taking 100 channels running onto it, but you'll need a lot of PoE switches because the little NAS drive doesn't have all the PoE to make it run. Now, very, very briefly, power over Ethernet. The idea is we're feeding voltage out from this up to the cameras that need it, or to the wireless access points or any other device like a VoIP phone, for example, that can pull its power that way. Generally runs about the 48 volt mark, and power-wise, I think there's 2 standard power ranges, one that's about the 12 watt mark and there's one that's about the 30 watt mark. Most of these cameras will run 12 watts, so running those on one of these is no problem. But if you've got PTZ cameras that run off PoE, they might be using the full 30 watts, and so you need to start thinking about the overall amount of power that available to make your system run, or run external power or bigger PoE switches or something like that to make sure the hardware works the way that you want it to. So yes, PoE total power must be less than can actually. The other thing that comes with PoE on board is that sometimes they do things like using different subnets or different network cards to run some cameras internally plus some on the network. And I'll show you. I've got this little demo board set up here with some specialised IP cameras on it. This is my own carpentry work, so feel free to come up and poke at it and make it fall over later. I'm not a carpenter by nature, as you can probably tell. But I've got a range of different cameras up here to give you a bit of an idea of what cameras can be capable of and what sort of different environments they might work with. To start off with, we've got a 2 megapixel IP body camera up here, or integrated camera, or bullet camera, depending on which terminology you're most familiar with. So only 1080p, but this has got the StarViz sensor built onto it. So this is our INP50 camera. The StarViz sensor is a very specialized one, particularly for nighttime work. Essentially, the way it works is by producing color images into almost complete black conditions. So if you put it onto the outside of a building, there's no street lighting, then it will give you a really good color image. So that particular one, yeah. Well, that's the main one at the moment, I think, is what we've got going off on that. Yeah. So this is that camera on its own. At night time, the color performance is fantastic. I've got one of these in the driveway at my house, and I can see the orange and blue in the colors on my car. I can see the red of the bottle brush. There's a pretty hideous car parked across in our laneway that's a silver Commodore with bright orange painted wheels and anyway, that I can see at night time as well. The resolution for it might not be the greatest at night time, but being able to see the color detail in something tells the difference between whether it was a red car, a blue car that's just sideswiped yours at night time. That might be enough for the police to do things. This has got a motorized zoom, definitely. So this, and I'll get into sort of proper PTZ stuff in a little bit, but PTZ in an analog system, might as well cover it a little bit now while I'm talking about it. PTZ in an analog system involves coax cabling to get the video where it needs to go. You need a signal wire that communicates with the camera, and the signal wire and assigning an address to it, the baud rate, making sure that the format matches and everything else in there so that the PTZ camera talks to the DVR is not complicated, but it's not the easiest thing in the world as well. You can run 20, 50, 100 analog PTZ cameras if you assign them addresses correctly. Generally via dip switches on the board. So when you're up on, setting a thing up beforehand, open it up, change one of the dip switches or a few of them over, assign it a binary address, and this is camera 31. Go back to your system, assign camera 31 to that channel, then that channel talks to this one, and when I use the PTZ controls, now I control camera 31. That's more or less how it works. With IP, I just plugged this thing in yesterday. I plugged it into the network and it's already told the NVR that it supports remote zoom capability. Didn't have to tell it to do anything, it just did it automatically, so that when I select this channel, I now have the ability to zoom.
The little camera, not the...
This is this one here. Yeah. So I can zoom in and out from here and watch our advertising guys and James not paying attention over the back and whatever else is going on here. In this sense though, what I want you to have a look at though is I've put some printouts of license plates around the building. So there's one just here by James's head, and obviously it's quite clear. And there's another one up behind our cashiers here. So if I'm going to zoom all the way out on this one to look at a general view. So this is as wide angle as this one goes, just tweak that a little bit. It's got autofocus as well. At the extreme ends of its range, it has a little bit of trouble with the autofocus. You may want to disable that and manually focus it instead. But from here, if I look at this and look at where this number plate is, I can obviously see it. It's quite clear, but I'm in great lighting condition. At night time, maybe that would be a little bit less clear and easier to see. With digital zoom, it's pretty easy to pick that out. The other one that's over here at reception, well, That could be hieroglyphics, but I'm not quite sure. Obviously useless when it's in wide angle. We've only got 1080p here spread across that entire wide angle that we're looking at. However, I take that same 1080p camera, I zoom it in as much as I can. Now the angle on this isn't quite right to do it, but I'll zoom in and then I'll do a manual bit of readjustment here and tweak that slightly up to there. So obviously this one is very, very close, but if I zoom all the way on the other one, I can still see it. And I've got enough detail to tell what those numbers are. Now, that is a 1080p camera, but now I've restricted its view to that much using its lens. So if you use the right camera with the right resolution, you can find what you need to find. Does that make sense? So there's no reason, there are a lot of high resolution cameras, 5, 6s, 8 and more on the market for it. There are 4K cameras and beyond, but you can get license plate recognition with an analog 480 line camera if you put it in the right position. Now, one last thing on this, it actually has compact flash storage on board as well. So you can do local recording to it. So if you're not doing an NVR based thing, you can just have 32 gig or whatever compact flash, micro SD on board. So you can do some storage here, do some basic recording and buffer and back it up to the NVR later on, or run both of them simultaneously. That's an option for you too. If you're doing remote cameras and you don't want the NVR, it's a fantastic option. So 2 meg camera, StarViz, very, very nice. Side of the big PTZ is an 8 meg camera. So this is an 8 megapixel bullet camera, and that is this one. Now, I haven't actually got this running in full 4K out of this and through, because I've got to run it through a switcher on the switcher to support 4K properly. So if I am running this in here, I'm still easily able to see the resolution on this one, and I can still see that one without too much trouble as well. It's a little bit less clear, but if I actually go back to the recording on that one, let's have a look. What do I want? Camera 3. It's got audio, running the audio recording. If I was to back that footage up onto a USB stick, it'd be the full 4K resolution. I'd be able to see exactly what I'm supposed to be seeing. And that would be a high resolution, lots of detail, and there's our staff walking around looking dodgy, so yeah, makes a lot of sense. All right, so one little thing I'll make note of there is what you're seeing live on the screen when you've got, okay, so let's run this in full screen mode. In that view right there, if I had 4K camera, 4K NVR straight to a 4K screen, that would be my lovely 4K image coming out of it. However, because I'm scaling that through, that's still a 1080p one. So if your customer's looking at it and going, I don't see everything I'm expecting to see, they probably need to upgrade to a 4K screen, or just download a bit of footage off the USB stick, plug it into a 4K screen and go to them, hey look, this is what it actually looks like when you need it. So if you're doing live viewing or live monitoring though, upgrade to a 4K screen if you want to see all the details you possibly can. All right, so let's get out of the full screen mode there. Have I managed to, yeah, it's really hard to see the mouse when it's on the big screen like that one. So this is my 8 meg camera. It has the same zoom lens that the 2 meg one does. So from here I can do the same sort of thing that I did with the other one. Zoom all the way in. There we go. This is all done electronically through the network. And you can see again that its narrow view is a lot more restricted, but a lot more detail comes out of it as well. So that for now I can see that I've got a Canon camera here that I'm looking at, versus before I probably couldn't see a hell of a lot out of it. So useful little thing. All right, so there are 2 of our body cameras. So I guess my point with the 2 of those is 2 meg versus 8 meg, StarViz versus non-StarViz. Choose your environment, choose your camera. We tend to go for cameras that have got variable lenses in them so that you can make them work. I find it very restrictive to have a camera that's fixed like these ones are, I plug this, sit it up in the corner. It does a job for me, but if I'm really trying to cover that driveway or that cupboard or that doorway, then this won't give me what I'm looking for. But the advent of higher resolution cameras might mean that with a bit of zooming, there might be enough detail in it to make it work. So if you are in an environment where you have to cover a nice wide angle and yet they still want some detail some of the time, having a higher resolution one will definitely help you out. All right, moving on to dome cameras. So I've got two of them set up on the board here at the moment. We've got this little one, which is our standard DM30 IP. So this is a 2 megapixel dome. It has no motorized zoom and focus controls. They're hard onto the board themselves. So when you're setting this thing up, when you're up on the ladder or on the scissor lift, you're taking a screwdriver with you and you are making the adjustments on the front of this camera to match the zoom and focus that you want to do. I've got this thing zoomed out to its maximum range at the moment, and you can see that in here, obviously, we've got enough detail to tell what's going on with the license plate on this one, but the one that's over Nian's head at the background, maybe just, but it's a bit dodgy. If I was to adjust the zoom on this one and play around with this a little bit and go the other way, because I want to, it doesn't focus as I go, you've got to do this, and then there's my other side. Adjust my focus to match what I was playing with, because my hand's in front of it makes it really difficult to tell. Certainly possible. So that's now in its most zoomed mode, or its most narrow field of view mode. But having a variable camera like that one means you can use its resolution to your best advantage, whatever that is, in whatever room. That's why this is the most common camera that we sell. It does a good job almost no matter where you go. Now, the other, here we go, the other dome camera I've got up here is this little one. This is a 4 megapixel camera, and they're relatively new for us, so it's a higher resolution natively. It's also got motorized zoom on it. So from what I'm doing here, I can just do it all automatically through the network, the same way I did with the other camera before. And again, you get from a nice wide angle view all the way in to quite a tight angled view. Now, there's one thing I'd like James to do in a second. Do you want to just take one step backwards for me, James? That's it. So there's one other license plate I've put in the building here, and it's right up on the far side of the cabinets, probably 35 meters away. It's sitting up on the top shelf over there, and with our 4 meg camera, you can quite clearly see it, even sort of pulling the digital zoom in from there. And obviously the one over here is quite easy to see too. Now, I want you to keep that in mind when I bring up this camera. So this is, if I've done it right, this should be our proper PTZ camera. Is it the one I'm thinking it is? Nope, I got it wrong. Hang on, what am I looking at? 1, 2, this one, sorry, this one. So the biggest camera that's up here is our new 6-inch PTZ. The factory that makes these cameras for us makes hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of these things. They go all over the world in all sorts of different environments, so they're obviously a very popular solution for a lot of different things. As a general camera, when it's set at its widest possible zoom, it's nothing particularly special. You can obviously see it's got same sort of 2 megapixel issues when you're this far away from it, but as an area view it's fantastic. However, being a PTZ camera means I can do stuff like this, and so the license plate that's just above our technician's head there, well, it's clearly visible here, but if I do this just a little bit more, and again this is all digitally done through the network, so I haven't, I'm going to zoom in between them, but I haven't told this NVR that this is a PTZ camera. It knows that it is. It knows that it can control sideways, up and down, and anything else we want to do with it. So if I zoom this thing around, go past the ones that are on the pole, there's James's head, there we go. And I can adjust the speed a little bit as well, but I mean, that's as clear as a bell, and we're 35 plus meters away. It's got a 20 times optical zoom built into it. So very, very useful thing to have. For something like our car park here, we could set this thing so that if somebody crosses, drives in via the driveway there, the NVR triggers this camera to take on a preset position to look at that car as it comes in through the driveway. I can do the same thing with the driveway that's here, or just send it to sweep across the entire car yard, or have a nice big open view part of the time as well. It's a PTZ sort of fantastic thing it can do. If you're monitoring it live, you probably want an actual controller rather than clicking and whatever through the network, but you can zoom and focus and move it around and do all that sort of stuff, and it's all digital. There's no extra cables on this. I've got power and data, and that's it. I can run an external controller, I can run audio in and out, I can do all sorts of other stuff with it, but in a very basic sense, this is what I'm doing right now. It also has really cool presets and cruises and other stuff you can do. So if I've probably stepped on it or done something there. There we go. It'll go back to its default mode. Yes, I've got cables running next to cables and hanging off the back of the board, which is probably not the way that they're supposed to be. And it's going to swing around and decide to focus on the particle board on the board behind it, which is great. Good thing is it can actually focus in from about 10 centimeters away from the board too, if that's ever useful for you. But my presets here, I can call any of these presets anytime I want to. Once it's done its reset mode and everything else, all I need to do is select a preset, call that preset, and it will zoom around and focus on the thing that I told it to focus on. So that's our adapter board over on the far side with the Cabac terminal strips and the rest of it. I can see that one of them's out of stock at the moment. I definitely can't read that from here, even with my glasses on. Without, forget about it. So there's some really cool stuff you can do with even just basic presets on these units. Go to it and call the other one. That's the position for the license plates I was looking at before. Preset 3, I think, is one of the boxes over here. So that's zoom and focus, preset back to its position there. To set one of those, all I do is I move it to a position I want it to be set in and add it as a preset. That's basically it. Each of these presets I can rename as well. So this could be driveway 1, driveway 2, gate 1, whatever it is. I've got cruising options. So a cruise that's in here, you add positions. So I add position 1. I can add position, say 3, and add it. And I can add position 2. I can change the cruise time to 5 and add that one. So I've now got 3 positions in there. Now my cruise 1, I can rename it, or I can call it. Now if I call it, it's going to go between position 1 that we were looking at before to position 3 where it zooms in and out, and then it should go back over to the other one after a pause in between of about 5 seconds. So again, this is a really useful thing if you want to monitor a large area or something specific. I really like this thing. I do wish I had them around my house now, but there is absolutely no reason for me to want them there other than I like them. I think they're cool. But rec retail on this thing's under $1,000. So for trade, cheaper, etc. But it's doing a lot of camera jobs all in one go. And obviously it's using its 2 megapixels in a very, very effective way. So you don't need massive amounts of pixels on board if your zoom can do all the hard work for you. It's got up to 150 meters worth of infrared as well. So, and a few other little tricks and features and things like that on board. Now, I'm aware that it's about 10 o'clock, so I should be starting to move on to my next session here, but I wanted to cover one last thing fairly quickly. With these NVRs, the biggest feature that people want to see is to get them connected to the network so they can view them remotely with an app or something else like that to do it. As far as that goes, it is generally a pretty easy process if you know a few things specifically. Number one, about the network before you start. Before you plug anything in, before you do anything else, work out what sort of modem and router you've got and what sort of access you have to those things, because you're going to need it. To get a signal out to the internet, you're going to have to talk with that modem that's there to make that happen. And the most common thing that makes a mess of these, well, the two most common things that makes a mess of it are, number one, not actually getting it on the network, thinking you've got it on the network but not actually on the network, and number two, not allowing the modem not allowing it to get through the firewalls and protection that it's got built in. So our system uses one that's called Universal Plug and Play, UPnP, and the idea is that this enable it here and happy with it. It's done. So I plugged this one in yesterday. I did the setup this morning on the app, so straight away for it. Scan the code, it's done, simple. I know what that modem is. I know what IP address ranges I can know that UPnP is turned on and everything else like that for it. If you turn up to a job site and using a Telstra NBN modem that uses 192.168.15 as its standard subnet for it, you need to be able to prepare the NVR for that and then log into the modem router to look at the UPnP settings to make sure that it's actually enabled and it will work. Some cases I've had to turn off UPnP, reboot, turn it back on, and then the system comes up and runs. Because UPnP is a little bit forgetful sometimes and a little bit overly has too much memory at other times. So if you plug this network addresses, then the modem might be still looking for that old ports through, and when you change it, it's not looking for it anymore. So turn off, turn back on again. As a on the NVRs and the DOS specific features, so I know I've pointed out some of them on these cameras and on the NVRs. I'm going to run DOS specific training at another time, so we talk more about the internals of the NVR, what each of the features mean, how different LAN ports can adjust, how the network performs, all those other stuff like that, all the little details I'll go to in another time in another session. This was more of a general purpose, think about CCTV, the types of systems out there, give you some examples, some problems and things that you need to think about, and that way keep it a little bit lighter and we can worry about all the nitty-gritty dotting the subdomains and subnets some other stage. Does that sound okay to you? Beautiful. All right, I think we're getting we need to sort of finish up so we can get the second session started, but do you have any questions for me at the moment or anything specific?
Would you be able to get the screens to rotate in sequence?
Yeah, you can. Yeah. So let's have a look. I'm trying to remember how you do it on this one. So there is a up on the top right here. So on the newer NVRs, you can see there's a channel listing there, and it's broken up into 3 different sequences for all 36 channels. So if I set up, okay, I have to go into its channel setting, channel grouping, and I want to set up a tour group, essentially. So I'll go from 1 to 3 to 5 to 2, whatever it is. I add those to my tour and I create a group name of tour. Create OK. And so there's my tour group. And it's got my cameras in and underneath it. If I go back to my preview page, in theory, did I do it right? No, I must have missed something. I didn't save it, is what I didn't do. Yeah.
Didn't actually have the troops.
That would be about right. I have a tendency to do that. I add those. Sorry. I always expect them to be smarter than they are. Save that. Save this success. I love the bit that comes up on that where it says kindly prompt as well. It's always nice. Oh, come on. What have I forgotten to do this time? I thought I did. Oh no, hang on. Yeah, right. I've got to do this and do this. I set up my group and then I add the cameras within that. Oh, hang on.
Will you transfer the arrow?
Yeah, probably. Yeah, there we go. That's more like it. There we go. There we are. So in theory, if this was just on a single screen for it and I'd set up timings and other stuff like that for it as well, then I can get it to scroll from one camera to the next one to the next one and so on as I go. The idea with these sort of tour groups is you could have multiple different ones depending on different times of day or different structures for it. And you can also trigger these as well. So if I, let's say, had a triggering event like a motion sensor or a line crossing event, I could set up a preview or a tour to say, right, now show these cameras. So if I did that outside here on our car park, I might have 3 general purpose cameras over the view and I might have one of these PTZs on there. Somebody drives in the driveway, that triggers the event, and now instead of the 30 cameras around the building or more, I've just got those ones shown on my screen and my PTZ zooms in on where it needs to go. So that sort of stuff's possible to set up. I think even down to like the basic 4-channel NVR has that same capability. You could put a 4-channel NVR with 4 of these onto it if you wanted to. So even our hybrids do that as well. Sorry, yeah.
Are these systems typically compatible with your smart home system?
They can be to greater or lesser extents. So one thing I didn't cover a lot of today is, at all, there are different ways of storing IP cameras. A NAS-based system will also run quite happily with some cameras on it. Went to a training last week for QNAP and they've added and adjusted their range so that now you can run, I think, up to 8 cameras off their sort of lowish to mid-tier NAS range. And that's a really useful thing. The app looks good, everything else works. They also do things like SMS notification and push notification for it, which isn't a feature that's on these ones. They can do it on theirs because of the way their app works. You know, it's consistently going backwards and forwards. With this one, it's more of a log in, log out type of basis. So there are some of those ones like the NAS drives that are more compatible with smart home networks, using if this then that sort of triggers, or pulling a data feed out of this as a multi-camera view and then viewing in that, and so on and so on. However, all of these cameras produces a network stream. That's what it does. And there are multiple streams, different resolutions, different types, and so on. So if you have, say, a control system app, and as part of it you've got some camera views, you could pull the video feed from this and inject it into your camera view in your smart home system. Using this to trigger something else, it's not compatible with Wave or Z or any of those, but you have got contact closures on the output of this, so you could run this into like the global cache IP to close contact converters or something similar, trigger an event, line crossing to trigger an event, to trigger a light to go off, or to play the barking dog noise or whatever it is that you want to do with it. In theory, you drive down your driveway at home at night time and it's a certain hour of the night. It triggers the front lights to come on, turns the lighting on inside at a low level, etc. That's all possible too. It's just a matter of how you set it up. But probably a little bit beyond the scope of what we're doing sort of for today, but definitely possible. Very cool. All right, if that's it for now, I might leave it and we'll move on to the second session in a couple of seconds. Thank you for your time.